Hey folks, so today I want to talk about a few things around AI, art, and creativity and consciousness that have been running in my head. Um, there has been a whole debate around the possibility of consciousness emerging in these models. I've written about my take, got lots of things to say about this, obviously. I mean, who wouldn't, right? So it's just right for so many different things, and it's just fertile ground. The short version of my belief at this point is that these models are not conscious right now, but consciousness could arise. I'm not going to talk about my broader consciousness beliefs right now. This is not super relevant to this discussion. At least we don't need to go in depth. I do believe that you need some wetware for consciousness to emerge, and even if we don't, I think the current level of complexity is not there yet for consciousness to emerge. The way I think about consciousness is it's not just a ladder, it's not just an incline, but it's steps. And you got, for example, human consciousness. Something about human consciousness that is not just an increase in magnitude, but there's something additional in scope to human consciousness that is not present in, most likely, right? We can't prove this for sure, obviously, right now, but most likely not present in dogs and cats and other mammals. And those mammals have something to them that reptiles don't, right? Even the reptiles are also conscious in their own way, very likely. So that's a very short version. There's been a whole lot of debate, right? Lots of people, lots of serious people that you would consider intellectual heavyweights like Geoffrey Hinton and Richard Dawkins, they really have taken the position that AI is very likely conscious. We can definitely prove that. And my short version of my take, because I've thought a lot about this and I want to move past this discussion for now because I want to focus on building, products and technology and all of that, is that consciousness right now, because we don't have any real theories, all of these discussions are very quasi-religious. You can't really get anything substantive out of them, anything definitive out of them. So sure, you can have, it's more like mental masturbation, right? Like you can do it as much as you want, but you're not going to make any concrete progress on anything. And I also believe that because we haven't made any progress in the last many years, I don't really expect anything magical to happen, anything groundbreaking to happen on the front of our understanding of consciousness. My hopes are pinned on AI helping us figure out some of these biggest mysteries, right? The hard problem of consciousness. So anyways, that's my short version. The reason I've been thinking about this is that if I took the position, as Richard Dawkins has or Geoffrey Hinton has, as have a lot of other people, that AI is conscious, it would actually be really good for my company. No, both the companies actually. But let's focus on Decovers for the sake of this discussion. I mean, it would be relevant even for Lumi, so we'll probably spend a couple of minutes on that. But for Decovers, a lot of the reasons, the biggest skeptics of AI art say that the reason there's nothing special about AI art, even if objectively, like pixel to pixel, it's the same art, is that it's created by nothing more than a dumb algorithm, right? Matrix multiplication, gradient descent. Like there's nothing special about it. So because we can reduce it to the process itself, to the mechanistic process, there's nothing special about it. But if consciousness could emerge in that, if you could make the case for that, and there's nothing that we can say that disproves that claim, then you could say that it's a conscious agent, it's a conscious entity that is creating this art, which would elevate that art, right? Because it's a sentient being that's creating this art. Geoffrey Hinton uses this word, an emerging being, right? Again, it's a heavily loaded word, but that's the nature of these discussions where people are using these terms. People who have been rooted in, like these are people who are skeptics, right? Like these are, especially Richard Dawkins. Like sure, when you're 85, you start losing your faculties, you start becoming senile, all of that. Even Geoffrey Hinton, drink too much of your own Kool-Aid, all of that happens. So that happens as people get older. As there's a saying in science and physics doesn't progress by ideas, it progresses by funerals, right? So that's the kind of thing that happens, right? People get caught up in their own ways, even if early on they were really intellectual heavyweights, they start losing the, those muscles, that intellectual honesty, and all the things that went into making them these heavyweights. So that happened. So you were seeing this happen, right? But again, the thing that I was curious about is that if I was not so biased towards AI not being conscious right now, then it would be really beneficial for the company, because I could make the claim, I could even use in marketing material, I could say that, imagine an AI that has its own worldview, this entity creating art for you, right? Like, just think about how special this would be, and as AI grows with you, think about how much more special that becomes. I've never made those claims, by the way, because I just can't in good faith, but it would be really interesting if I had a different set of beliefs. So I was just thinking about that particular counterfactual, and how, you got to let your beliefs hurt your bottom line. If your beliefs are worth anything, if your convictions, if your principles are worth anything. And I have taken this, it's a pretty strong position that I've taken, like in terms of confidence level, and in terms of, conviction, right, which is, in other words, confidence level. So that was one aspect of it. I could talk more about this particular aspect, but I want to move on because there are quite a few interesting things I want to talk about. But art, if art, to kind of keep close to this particular topic, if AI was conscious, even if AI is not conscious today, we do know AI will be conscious at some point in the future. It could be 2028, it could be 2029. Right. Think about the art, think about the music, think about the films and books and all of that AI would create. It would have this unique flavor, this unique texture, because it would bring its own worldview, its own way of looking at the world. Because I would have a new set of experiences, a new set of perspectives on the world that humans have not hitherto been able to, right? Because again, as diverse as our worldviews and our experiences have been, we're still biologically based. We still, operate under certain conditions, under certain constraints, which limits the scope and the latent space of possible perspectives, possible artworks. Artworks is obviously a very subjective term, but possible stories and movies and creative works is so vast, it's boundless essentially. And AIs would obviously occupy one space, one part of that. There would be ideally an overlap between our art and AI art, where AI starts creating art for itself, and AI starts creating art for obviously humans. For that to be a case, obviously that has to happen in the overlapping space. And there would be alien art, where imagine art that humans can't even grapple with, right? Something like, let's say there's some super, like there's theories of physics that we can't even begin to understand, and let's say there's an art form based upon those theories, right, created by some Cartier scale 3 civilization. Like, we wouldn't have any idea that this is even art. We wouldn't even have any idea this is math, right? So many possibilities of possible art forms and possible media, possible creative forms are, there in our future. They're in the latent space of creative work. So that's something to be very excited about. And then bring this back down to earth from a Cartier scale 3 civilization, with Wizzy, right? Wizzy's obviously right now, well, not right now, but even for the foreseeable future, it's creating art specifically for you, right? It doesn't really have its own worldview, its own biases, its own, perspectives and all of that. But over time, that's going to emerge, right? Because we are going to be building, we as in LNT is going to be building aligned, emotionally intelligent AIs, its own new hardware paradigm. So we are actually going to be creating minds for real. So it's so funny that I'm opposed to the idea of these current models being minds or beings, while I am making the outright statement that we at LNT will create new minds. So am I opposed because we want to be the first? This is my ego which is preventing me from accepting the idea that consciousness could be a thing. It's a valid question. I mean, I've got certain priors on that. Okay, so let's take a step back, right? So my conviction on the lack of consciousness in these current models is based upon my understanding of consciousness. And my understanding of consciousness is obviously super limited. I don't have a background in neuroscience. I've only done cursory reading of lots of articles, skimmed some books, a couple of books, not super deep, but because it's always been an interest of mine, and obviously consume content through YouTube videos, Set, and lots of other people that I've listened to, right? And so I've synthesized a lot of those worldviews. I've got my own very rudimentary model of what is consciousness and how could it emerge and all of those sort of things. So my conviction is based upon my understanding. It does not have any weight, right? So just because I believe in it, right, as a scientist, like my conviction, as high as it is, doesn't carry too much weight in the grand scheme of things. It's just that because we don't have any strong models, I had to take a quasi-religious belief. I had to bring a quasi-religious mindset to this. It's like free will, right? Free will is actually a pretty good example of this. So I hate this discussion. I bloody hate this because, if I'm being intellectually honest, based on my understanding, my non-emotional understanding, a non-anthropomorphic understanding, and non-human biased understanding of consciousness and the human mind and the human brain and all of that, free will does not exist the way we think of it. And if it doesn't exist, then nothing matters. And that is that obviously takes you down the path of nihilism. I hate that, despise that. So I've taken the religious belief that I operate as if I am free. Even though the intellectual part of me, on some level, has a 90% conviction that humans are not free, just based on our current understanding. Now, I would so love to be proven wrong on this. Not me being proven wrong, but the people who believe that we don't have free will, right? Sam Harris school of thought. I don't think about free will too much because it's just f's up your brain, right? It's just not good for you, mate. It's just not. Even now, like, no, I don't want to think about it. Because it's the reason I love thinking about physics is, obviously I love thinking about physics for all sorts of reasons, but part of it is it doesn't completely demolish your worldview, not your relationship to everything, right? If you don't have free will, if consciousness is just a mirage, an illusion, then everything that we hold dear. I was just, walking outside. It was 3 a.m. The full moon was out, and there was thunder. It was drizzling. I was walking. The moon was, as I said, it was smoldering brightly, and it was just so gorgeous. I was just walking, and I was telling myself that it's just there are these moments where you just are in a certain, like, you're just walking, or just in the moment, and you feel the beauty of being alive, right? That is what consciousness is, essentially. The subjective experience that you feel that becomes more pronounced in certain moments, become more pronounced in obviously very intense moments. But even if it's not something super intense, if you're just walking, you're just looking at a sunset, you're just smelling a flower, you're just looking at these squirrels running around, you just little pleasures, little moments in life, right? You still are cognizant of this faculty that allows you to just appreciate it. And if it's just a mirage, or if it's just a top level layer, right, that's a very depressing thing. But anyways, these are not discussions I want to have at 4:20 in the morning actually. Need to go to sleep. Damn it. Yeah, damn it. What was I talking about? Let's return back to it, because it's so easy to get lost in these mazes of consciousness and these bloody hell. So it's 4:20. I need to go to sleep. I'll talk about 2 ideas, and that's it. Call it quits for the night. We'll take it up tomorrow. So one idea is the Turing test for art. Now, you think about the Turing test for, well, the OG Turing test, which is conversational in nature. You could devise a Turing test for everything, right? You could devise a Turing test for music. You could devise a Turing test for books, films. You could derive a Turing test for, well, audio, right? Is it human sounding? Is it AI sounding? You could do it for an AI that cooks, right? Is this dish made by humans, made by an AI, right? So you could create a Turing test. Turing test, basically the idea, the bottom level idea, right? If you strip away the context of the original test, is that if you don't know, so there's entity A, entity B, one is human, one is AI. If you don't know who's who, and they create something, right? There's an output, and you engage with the output, or it could be a conversational thing, it could be, iterative. If you don't know what's what, then the AI, for all intents and purposes, if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it is a duck, right? So it's got that je ne sais quoi that humans have. It's got something that has elevated it to the level of humans, right? At least on that particular front. And if an AI passes a Turing test for art, if it passes a Turing test for music, if it passes a Turing test for therapy, for coaching, right? It's got something really, really deep. The generalization, the compositionality, it's just something beyond, beyond impressive, right? And so I was thinking about this, applying this idea to the Turing test of art. Now, they kind of have already passed the Turing test for art, if we are being honest. They haven't passed the Turing test for the best art. What would be super interesting is how, create a list of some artworks. Because these are the best artworks, and some of them are my favorites, some of them are just artworks that were taken from art critics, art historians, right? Because my perspective is going to be super limited, just like with neuroscience. I'm not an art historian, haven't read books, haven't really, I go to galleries, but it's not been a big part of my life at all, right? Like, sure, I did art for a couple of years, but it was just such a tiny part of my life. I am not, by a stretch of the imagination, an artist, even though I've got, streaks of it. So I wouldn't take my own, as a scientist, I wouldn't take my own lack of, background to as a basis to build a good model of a Turing test for art. So I'll use some of my own biases and tastes and flair, and then I'll take in obviously artworks from the best artists. So Guernica, The Process of Memory, The Scream, Napoleon Crossing the Alps, The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, The View of Toledo, The Ninth Wave, The Last Supper, The Astronomer, The Fall of the Damned, The Psalm on the Sea of Galilee, The Hunters in the Snow, The Garden of the Earthly Delights, Washington Crossing the Delaware, Fort Wimeu, The Rafters of Medusa, Red Balloon, The Lady of Shalott, The Haywain, The Battle of Isis, Dante and Virgil in Hell, Flame in June, The Night Cafe, The Great Wave of Kanagawa, Watson and the Shark, Pilgrimage to Satara, Impression Sunrise, The Tower of Babel, Fallen Deer by Winslow Homer, The Conversion of St. Paul, Scene in the Tyrol, The Golden Gate by Albert Bierstadt. Right, so these are some artworks that I've got that if Wizzy is able to generate artworks that are better than this, right, like cross the threshold where someone who's not, the thing about some of these artworks that you need to know your art history, right? Because they're not artworks that are great by default. They're great because they were the first ones to bring some new ideas to the fore. The depth of subliminal messaging, the symbolism, the painterly techniques and a lot of that extra stuff, right? That the amateur wouldn't be able to notice. So the amateur is actually not the best person to use for this particular Turing test, unlike a conversational Turing test, because conversations, everyone engages in conversations. So if an AI is able to fool a median person into, it's still not as good as fooling a 99th percentile, 99.99 percentile person who's trying to actually see, trying to ask questions, right? So if you ask a scientist who's working in the field of AI to take the Turing test, like their results would be a lot more impactful, right? They'd actually be able to, like the bar for that particular AI to cross that particular Turing test with that particular person would be much higher, because this person knows what questions to ask. So for instance, an AI, that scientist could ask questions that trip up the current current breed of models. So it could ask questions about riddles, right? Riddles are good examples of that, or questions to do with implicit knowledge, which is not present to any real degree on the internet, right? World model testing, those sort of things. but an amateur wouldn't know what strengths and weaknesses, and an amateur is gonna fall short. But so for this one, we'd choose an art historian, someone who's an art critic who actually has consumed a lot of stuff, and we'd assume that we'd basically, out of the list of, let's say, the top 10,000 artworks, top 1,000 artworks in history, as determined by, as averaged by the best 100 or 1,000 art historians, their average, you basically average their rankings and create that list. Yeah, let's assume that this particular art historian, they haven't been on the scene for too long, but they've got a really good taste, but they might not have seen all 1,000, so there's still like a few hundred artworks in that top 1,000 that they have not come across. So we take those 200, and then we take 200 artworks created by the best AI, right? Like, so let's say we create an AI that's the best in the world at art. It's like it surpassed all the human artists on all the ways that we can quantify, right? Art and art quality. So we've got that AI versus the works of the best 200 of the best works in human history, and if an AI can surpass those, then at that point the AI is unequivocally the best artist on the planet. Now again, these are great thought experiments, but you gotta put your money where your mouth is, right? So we want to build that AI like that. That's one of the meta goals that we have as a company. I'm just gonna say it out there. And the reason why we're gonna do this, I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. Actually, let me talk about it right now. So I don't like gatekeepers. I absolutely despise it. And it's unfortunate that our first paradigm of AI is built upon other people's labor. I would have much preferred that our first learning algorithm, didn't require much data and was able to learn with minimal data, just like humans, and was still able to improve iteratively and get better and better. And I didn't just have hope, I do have strong convictions that is going to happen, because I've got loads of reasons I could say why I believe that, but we don't need to get into those technical reasons in this conversation. But what's going to happen is, the reason we built a deep learning based model as a first AI paradigm is that it was just so much easier to throw compute a lot of data, and have intelligence emerge from that. That was the easy approach. The next approaches are going to be difficult, and so it's pretty intuitive that the first AI paradigm was going to be the most accessible one, the lowest hanging fruit one. So this is probably going to be true across the board, across civilizations, across the cosmos. The first AI paradigm is going to be very scaled up in terms of compute and data, and then over time we're going to be able to we're going to actually be able to learn about the master algorithms. It's not going to be one algorithm, it's going to be a bunch of it, which go into having the entity learn in real time, having the entity get better in real time, and across dimensions, right? Across dimensions of, obviously, again, lots of different dimensions like science, language, math, art, creativity, all those different sort of things. So my point is that I hate gatekeeping, and up until now, art is so powerful, movies, books are so powerful, but we had all of this, the hearts of these things by, obviously, it's just, this is not some malevolent or some grand conspiracy, but we just had a handful of people who were really good at creating the best music, great high quality music rather, at creating high quality art. So it just so happened that these things were in a low supply. But I want to imagine a world where you can have everyone have the best AI artists for them, right, in their home, the best AI musician, the best AI writer, the best AI coach, the best AI therapist, the best AI matchmaker. Remove the word AI from it, because at some point AI will seem, us using AI in this context will just seem silly. So just the best matchmaker, the best therapist, the best coach, the best artist, the best musician, the best creative, right? So we're gonna have that is just written. Now, if it's a foregone conclusion that's going to happen, we want to do it, we want to build it because we're building a company in that space, so might as well, build something on top of it, right? Build the foundational models for the best AI, creative AI, because I mean, creative AIs are like the bread and butter of this company. Right now, we are borrowing from other companies. At some point, we would want to build our own models. If we are going to be building our own AIs, our creation AIs, creative AIs, might as well aim for the stars, right? Which is literally the most creative AIs in the entire world. That are not just not on par, but they actually surpass human artists. Because then, and in a way, like the entire meta history of the last, probably since the printing press, has been about democratization of various things, of capabilities, of leverage, and AI is the ultimate manifestation of that trend line. It is going to remove, well, I wouldn't say it's going to remove all gatekeepers will still exist in other forms, but pretty soon, relatively soon, everyone's going to have, because we are going to create this, everyone's going to have the access to the best AI artists, the best AI storyteller, the best, most creative AI to, help them bring to life whatever they want to create, right? Co-create. We want to put those capabilities in the hands of millions of people. Because why shouldn't you? Like, the creativity that you unlock, the joy that you unlock, the delight, the beauty, the excitement, the passion, the stories, the potential you unlock by having this AI be in every single home. It's just so immense that it becomes a duty, our fundamental duty as a company, because we have chosen this mission to extend it to building this AI. So that's the last thing I want to say, I guess, today. 26 minutes, definitely, yeah. Yeah, 26 minutes is just way too long, and it's 4:34. Boy, oh boy, I feel sleepy. Damn it. Okay, I gotta go to sleep. Yeah, I mean, this was a really long one because I've got so many notes over here that I want to talk about, but we'll have to keep it as a second part for tomorrow, maybe even a third part, because I mean, I could talk about this endlessly. Tomorrow we're going to talk about taste and intelligence, the relation between the two. We're going to talk about the limitations of songs. We're going to talk about and how AI can completely change the game. We're going to talk about what does it mean to live in a world of literal abundance of the best music, the best movies, the best books. Right, what is it? What are the considerations that we need to look at? We're going to talk about quite a few other interesting things. So keep tuned in for tomorrow. For today, that's all for now. I'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of. Take care. Bye bye. Cheers.